last time also I tried to argue that how human communication and animal communication differ. And what happens from the audience, some of the participants they told that it's purely an anthropocentric point of view from where I am arguing that human communication is something very different than the animal communication. So I returned to my home with the question that how to come out of this anthropocentric approach to human language, and then what I found that this is the only perspective that we have with us. We do not have an absolute point of view from where we can talk about human language or animal language. So there are certain questions that we need to know first. What is language? When we are talking about language, it comes with some other connotation, it comes with some other significations. For example, in case of bird, we are talking about bird communication and bird song. And when the bees are communicating with themselves, we call it waggle dance. Okay, but we never call it that bee has a language. We never say that bird has a language or monkey has a language. So we need to know how language is different from communication. So that part we will be explaining while talking about what is language. And then comes what does it mean to be human. So language is human specific trait. So in some way this language actually defines us, and the way and also human being only use language. So here is a small quotation from Charles Taylor. So what he is telling that we think of at least higher animals as having desires, even as having to choose between desires in some cases, or at least as inhibiting some desires for the sake of others. But what is distinctively human is the power to evaluate our desires, to regard some as desirable and others are undesirable. This is why no animal other than man appears to have the capacity for reflective self-evaluation that is manifested in the formation of second-order desire. So these are the 2 points that I have highlighted: the capacity for reflective self-evaluation and the formation of second-order desire. That actually makes our communication different from the animal communication. So in today's these 2 presentations, I will try to approach these 2 questions. One is the first, how significant linguistic communication is in singling out human from non-human. And the second is, how do we reach to a theoretical understanding of language as a capacity for reflective self-evaluation manifested in the formation of second-order desires. So, what is language? So, before I explain this point, let me to know that how do you feel? What is your understanding about language? Any guess? Any answer?
It's a tool for communication.
It's a tool for communication. Yes. I'm expecting a few more responses from you.
That has meaningful sounds or syntax.
That has meaningful sound and syntax. Good. Anything else? Well, so the thing is that often we define language as a medium of communication, but the thing is that language is more than just communication. It is the primary method by which we do things together. So we not only communicate through language, but while communicating we actually perform certain acts. We perform all those acts to achieve certain goals, to achieve certain purposes. So our linguistic communication is purposeful and it is always directed to some goal, to some purposes that we want to achieve. So language is the accumulation of shared meaning and common ground. So when we are communicating to reach to a common ground, to create a common ground, to come up with a common understanding about the world. And that is the reason whenever communication is taking place in a discourse, it is always bidirectional, it is not a unidirectional kind of thing, it is not a one-way traffic. then one person will speak all the time and other will just remain as a passive recipient of those messages. Second thing is that language can also be viewed, language can also be defined from the viewpoint of conversation. So what happens when we converse? When we converse, we actually take terms. So it's not the case, once again, that I'm talking about something from my point of view. The case is also that when the hearer is equally free to insert his or her perspective in a dialogue. So turn taking is an important issue, and then collaboration. So in order to make sense out of a communication, we should have a commonly shared knowledge base. Because suppose if I speak in this class in Bengali or in Chinese, and if you don't have an access to the norms, linguistic norms of Bengali or Chinese, you will hardly be able to come up with some sense. So language is a collaborative act, and then co-creation. So when we communicate, we all together create the world again and again. With each articulation, we create the world. We create our understanding of the world. We create some views about certain aspects, certain phenomena. So our language is more than just communication. Again, we have two questions. So those who are actually claiming that human communication and animal communication are equal, for them it's a question from my side: do you think our ability to swim is just equal to frog's swimming ability?
Yes.
Yes? Yeah? Tell me. Yeah, but why?
Why? You're just talking about ability, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, both are capable to do that. Will that be a sufficient answer to it?
Definitely, when we are talking about the ability or the capacity, yeah, both of us are able to swim. But the thing is that the way a frog is able to swim and the way I am able to swim, these are two very different things, isn't it? So in case of frog, it's an instinct kind of thing. It has no need to learn. Okay. But for me, I have to learn it. And in order to learn it, I should have some understanding of the environment that a body of water has. Okay. So we should have some intuitive understanding of the notion like buoyancy and all these things. We should know how should I throw my hands and legs to keep myself afloat, isn't it? But for frog, it is not required. So one similar type of question you can see here now. Do you think our marriage system is just equal to animals' mating behavior?
No.
No. Why? See, the thing is that this talk, as I have already told in my previous slide, so this will be in a very interactive way. This talk will be delivered in an interactive way. It's not the case that answer is located to me only. Okay. So it is somehow distributed over the audience. So I need some feedback from you. So when you are telling me no, the answer is no. Why is it?
They don't plan marriage.
Pardon?
They don't plan marriage.
They don't plan
Marriage.
But why?
Marriage is a no.
Marriage is a
No.
good. Then
I think that to compare marriage system and the mating behavior is kind of a category mistake. So if you're saying that, do you think your mating behavior is just equal to animals' mating behavior? Perhaps I would say yes. But when you're talking about marriage system, it's again norm, a cultural ritual, right? So for example, if I take a macaque society again, back to there, and I'm saying that they have these cultural norms of the adult females and the adult females' daughters taking the first position, the adult position, right? So alpha position actually. So they do have these norms and their structures in different ways, right? Maybe not marriage.
yeah.
But I'm saying
yeah.
if you're comparing, so for example, the first question, when you're saying ability to swim is equal to frog swimming, I understand that there is a correlation there. But this, I think that you're comparing a norm-based system with the behavior. I'm saying that collection.
That's actually the answer that we should have. So the thing is that our marriage system is something more than the simple mating behavior. It's not simply a mating behavior kind of thing, because marriage in itself is a symbolic system. Okay, so it has certain norms, certain rules, and we have this marriage system because we have some elaborated purpose. So it's not the case we are actually guided by certain instinct. We are always under the control of nature. So culture is also a very important thing that we need to keep in our mind while talking about the human communication and non-human communication. And in that case, what we often used to do, we often used to refer to the symbolic reference that makes human unique from the non-human being. So here is a definition of linguistic communication. Communication is a social activity of a combined effort of at least two participants who consciously and intentionally cooperate to construct together the meaning of their interaction. So now it becomes essential for us to understand, since we have talked about the symbolic reference, we need to know what we mean by the symbolic communication. Then, what actually defines symbolic communication? So in this definition, you will see some of the concepts are central, like social activity. So communication is a social activity, because as I have already told earlier, that in order to communicate in a meaningful way, you should have a commonly shared knowledge base. So when even in your lonely hour, when you are talking with yourself, you are following some norms, which actually is the part of that commonly shared knowledge base. Second, it's a conscious effort. So when we are communicating with certain purposes. It's not the case that we are communicating without any purpose, without any goal. So it involves consciousness. Second is intentionally cooperate. So it is by intention I mean it is directed. So even when I am talking with myself, it is directed to me. And when I am communicating with you, it is directed to you. And it is cooperative in the sense that in a communication, no one will win the game and no one will lose the game. So it's mainly the cooperative behavior that defines linguistic communication. And then comes the interaction. So the construction of meaning should be understood with a special reference to the interaction. So I am arguing something, I am counter-arguing to some point. All these things finally results into a ever-evolving world of meaning. So these four concepts define symbolic communication in case of human. So hopefully you might have some questions now. So can yeah.
So we talk about communication as social activity, but the way we are looking at participants should be very abstract. It's participants. When we say at least two participants, our notion of participant is very abstract. Though we are defining communication as social activity.
Yeah, that is the reason I have told that even in your lonely hour when you are talking with yourself, okay. So you and yourself, these are two abstract concepts. That's why I have told. So it's not like that all the time these participants will be very concrete kind of thing. Okay. They could be abstract also. Yeah.
Abstract in the sense that any two individuals X and Y talking to each other.
Yeah.
But in actual social activity, it is never any two individuals X and Y talking to each other. It is the social background of X and Y, which will play a very important role in social activity. Anybody doesn't talk to anybody.
Well.
And then, therefore, I think the socially cooperative aspect is very correlated. I don't think there is a lot of cooperation in communication. For example, a boss issuing an order to a employee is hardly any cooperation.
Yeah. So even if we keep the notion of hierarchy power structure for the time being.
That's why I said that the individual is very abstract in the definition.
So if we keep those things little bit away for the time being, then what we will see that even in a communication between a boss and its subordinate, okay, in order to have a meaning out of that communication, they should have a common understanding of about the linguistic norms. Okay, without that norm, that communication will fail. That is the claim I am trying to make. Okay, so you don't have any problem with this point.
No, I think a common norm understood.
Yeah.
The conclusion which comes that neither of them lose the game. Actually, one of them already lost the game before the communication started because of the hierarchy and the norm.
Yeah. So the thing is that, as we have earlier told, that humans' purposes are much more elaborated than the others. So now these elaborated purposes are also structured in themselves. Okay. So if we take an account of all those things, then might be this competition, win, lose kind of thing come into the picture. But here we are talking in a very low level. Okay. So in linguistics, often we used to define language in terms of these 11 features. So some of the time you will feel that not all the 11 features, not all these 11 features are equally useful to define human language. In fact, we can do it with 6 features, but I feel that it is better to have an understanding of what do the features mean in the context of human communication. So we will start with the use of vocal auditory channels. So one is, when we speak, we produce some sounds. How do we produce the sound? By manipulating our vocal apparatus, and then that sound gets translated into the acoustic medium, and again when it reaches to the ear, it converts, it creates some wave, some vibration on the eardrum, and in this way language is moving from any utterance is moving from one place to other place and communicating meaning. Now the thing is that, what is the significance of having a vocal auditory channel? The advantage of using vocal auditory channel is that message can send or receive in situations where vision fails. But then the question is the feature specific to human only? Whether we see the use of vocal auditory channel only in case of human communication, or you can see it even in non-human communication. So even in non-human communication you can see it, isn't it? So there are different type of calls among in the monkey society. Okay, there are 2 calls, there are alarm calls and all these things. Okay, and in fact, in case of rattlesnake, if I can remember that it is not using the vocal auditory channel, but it can move its tail to create certain sound to give some message to the others. Okay.
What about paradise birds?
Pardon?
Paradise birds.
Yeah. Can you explain?
The paradise bird gives a mating dance, and because the vision is sufficient for that. Wouldn't a mating dance?
Yeah, it's a mating dance. See, the use of the language itself. So it's a dance. Okay, so again you are not calling it language. Okay.
So here we are concentrating on communication and not on language, right?
Pardon?
We are concentrating on communication.
We are concentrating on human communication here in this presentation specifically. Okay. Then comes the notion of arbitrariness. So what does this arbitrariness says? It says that there is no one-to-one relation between the signifier and the signified. Okay. And in one case, a signifier means something else, and in other case it might again mean something very different than what it has actually meant in the previous situation. So this arbitrariness principle can be talked about from at least from 2 different perspectives. So arbitrariness can be talked from the viewpoint of across the speech communities, and it can also be talked about from the viewpoint of within the speech community. Now, what do we mean by across the speech community? So this is a picture of a dog. Now in English we call it dog, in Latin we call it canis, in French chain, and in German it is in Hund. So if there was a natural connection between the signifier and signified, then it should always remain dog for all the speech communities. But the thing is that in one community we are calling it as a dog, in another community we are calling it as a Hund. So this shows that the relation between the word and its meaning is arbitrary. And what we mean by the within the speech community? So when we are talking about arbitrariness from the viewpoint of within the speech community. Now if you take these 3 examples, you will see that first has very different meaning in these 3 different constructions. For example, the meaning of first in first food and the meaning of first in first tap, they are something very different. In one case, the food is readily available and you can consume it quickly. Okay, but in other case, it's a track where you can move first. Okay, so the meaning of first actually differs according to the context. It varies according to the context. So if we are talking about arbitrariness from the viewpoint of across the speech communities, then convention becomes the central idea. But if we are talking about arbitrariness from the viewpoint of within the speech community, then context becomes a major issue. So both the convention and context, both are central to the notion of linguistic communication in humans. So you will not see this type of thing in animal communication. So the next feature is the semanticity. So whenever we are communicating, whenever we are articulating some phrases or words or some sounds, it always mediates through a level of symbols. Okay, it always mediates through a level of concept. So it is a pure. It is actually specific to human communication. That is the claim people have often made. But one might again say that this one is an anthropocentric argument. But how do I know that when a monkey is giving an alarm call, it is not mediating through an underlying conceptual level? Okay. So clearly, I don't have any answer for this thing. You might have some answer. Any answer? The question is that whether the animal communication mediates through some symbolic level, or do they follow any norm, linguistic norm, while communicating with each other?
So,
I don't think there's an in-principle answer to that. If
Yeah.
investigation has or has not revealed it, what it
Yeah.
depends on.
Any other? So actually it seems that, to me it seems that the notion of semanticity is actually a matter of degree. Because the way our word is elaborated, the way it may not be elaborated in case of a monkey. Okay. So the richness of the conceptual level depends on that. Okay. So that much we can actually say here. Then cultural transmission. The claim is that language is being transferred from one generation to other generation through the process of culture. So, while transmitting linguistic knowledge from one generation to other generation, what happens? It often comes in contact with other language, with other linguistic norms, and sometimes the existing norm gets modified, sometimes it gets replaced, and sometimes even we have seen the language may get died. Okay. So this type of cultural transmission is also a property of human communication, but that doesn't guarantee that cultural transmission is not the property of animal communication. Because in case of elephant, we have seen that they also transmit their knowledge of the food source or the source of the water body through the process of their culture. But again, that culture may not be qualitatively same as the culture we have. So spontaneous usage in case of animal communication, communication often takes place under some stressed situation. So might be a monkey has seen a snake and it produces a chatter sound. Then its other team members, they will just stand in their behind leg and they will see where is the snake and all these things. Okay. So this is always happening under a stress situation all the time. But in case of human being, communication is not limited to the stress situation. Even when we are not under stress, we can communicate with each other. Okay. Whether I am making any sense or not, I am in doubt. Okay, so better to have some questions or reactions from you.
it's not true. I mean, so alarm calls, yes, definitely stress situations, but you do have mating calls and other calls, which I do not see that, I mean, the kind of stress that you're meaning to say about the alarm call it's not really identical. So again, I was thinking about the songbirds. So the cultural transmission as well as the usage is really across varied contexts. So, and again, I mean, I recently came up with the thing that even macaques or chimpanzees, they have babbles. So it's kind of compared with the human babble system. So I'm saying that it's not only for that. So allogrooming again, when you do that, before that you have these calls. So it's not only about the stress situation.
Yeah, no, actually by stress, because of having this word Jewish, so that stress come to my mind. Actually, what I intend to say that it always happens under the influence of the external stimuli.
Okay.
Okay. So this stimuli could be of any type.
Right.
Okay. So that's the point.
Right.
Now, do we agree with this point or not? That is the issue.
No,
You're supposed to say
so you
something?
say that in case of human communication,
Pardon?
there can be a kind of a communication under external stimulus.
Yeah, that is the exact point I try to direct. The thing is that earlier I have told that human communication is always purposeful. So we have certain purpose with us, and that's why we are communicating. Even now when I am speaking, I have some purpose with me to communicate with you. And in fact, the way you respond, okay, that also had certain purposes. Okay. And if we subscribe the view of conversation, okay, and the cooperation, then definitely we always have some purposes, isn't it? So the thing is that this spontaneous usage of language, to what extent applicable only to human communication, is a questionable issue.
So you're questioning the intentionality.
Pardon? Yeah,
The
intention.
intentionality.
Yeah. No, what did you say?
Intentionality.
Ah.
Are you questioning that or you
No, I am questioning this spontaneous usage.
But see,
In the absence of the external stimuli, do we communicate with others? That's the question. Because in linguistics, often we used to make this argument that even in the absence of external stimuli, we communicate. Okay.
example,
For example, like in case of monkey, as I have told, that if they found some thread, then they produce thread call. Okay. But in case of human will never produce a thread call until and unless they see they receive some external stimuli.
no, but that is limited to the instinctive based actions, right?
Yeah.
There can be many other actions, right? Apart from it.
Yeah. Anyway. So my point is that even when we are, for example, when we are writing a piece of story or something like that, when we are talking about some response, some threat call kind of thing, a situation, when we are trying to create a situation referring to a threat, we need to create some cause for that one, isn't it? So there will always be a cause-effect kind of relation. So it is in that sense, spontaneous usage, the very concept of spontaneous usage is not that much reasonable, it seems to me.
Probably there is a displacement between cause and effect, between the stimuli.
Yeah, that point will definitely come to our, okay, so you are talking about that there is a displacement between this cause and stimulus.
Stimulus and the response
Yeah.
get displaced. For example, something that happened to me in my childhood
Yeah.
will cause me to speak about it today.
Okay, definitely. We will be coming to that point in the next slide. It's all about actually displacement. So, but before that, we need to talk about this turn taking. So, when we are actually interacting with each other, you might have noticed that when I am speaking, others are hearing, and at the same time, when others are speaking, I am hearing. So, this type of turn taking is actually specific to human communication and linguistic communication. And turn taking has some more other signification the way I will like to explain it, that turn taking is not a very simple type of phenomenon. So I am able to take the turn means I know how to create perspective, how to understand others' perspective from where you are actually talking about something. Okay. So this is actually specific to human communication. Now coming to the duality or double articulation, So in case of human communication, you might notice that in one level, a word is capable enough to refer to something like dog, and in another level, when you split it into the sound segments, then this D, O, G in isolation and individually, they hardly refers anything. So this is a property which is specific to human communication because it involves the notion of combinatoriality. Now, how you will combine the different sound segments, that is also being defined and designed by the linguistic practice of a community. Second, coming to the point of displacement that you have tried to argue. So, because of having a rich symbolic system, we can talk about here and now, and at the same time we can talk about some distant places, what happens in distant places, what happens in America, what happens in London, and at the same time we can also talk about something, what happens last year or what happens in my childhood. So often those who are studying animal communication, they say that even to some extent, certain amount of displacement property you can see in bee dance. So since I am not a bee expert, so let me to show you how does it look. Sound is on.
Can you just pause it for once?
Huh?
Can you just pause it for once?
Just wait, I need the sound picture. But anyway, you can see that video later on. So, but I can say that even if you watch these organs, you can clearly find from here that they can talk about the spatial displacement, but they are not being able to do something which can capture the notion of temporal displacement. Okay. So if we identify something yesterday, he or she will never be able to communicate to its team members.